George Russell has basically confirmed that he has a contract for 2027, but as we expected, it is a 1+1, but with an automatic trigger. And this brings us back to the point that there is a good chance that Max Verstappen will be in Mercedes in 2027. Let's talk about it. This video is brought to you by checkmythumbnail.com, the analysis tool for YouTubers by YouTubers. Try it free today. So look, George Russell recently signed a quote-unquote multi-year deal, which we discussed on this channel, and I pointed out that I was pretty sure that it was a 1+1 contract, but that George would have made sure he had something in his performance contract to ensure that if he outperformed Kimi, essentially, he gets to keep his seat, even if the Verstappen deal that Toto has been pushing so hard for on his yacht in Sardinia goes ahead. And George has all but confirmed that today. What he actually said was, it is something I haven't actually said publicly, but the deal is if I'm performing next year, we have a specific clause that if I reach a certain target, we will automatically renew for 2027. So my seat for 2027 is in my hands, so I'm not going to be strung along here. Now, the important part of this is, after doing a quick bit of digging, it sounds like that is very similar to Max Verstappen's deal, which is basically if he's somewhere within the driver's standing and not if it's offset to Kimi, for example. Now, why that's interesting is that means that George has probably pushed for a specific thing here. It's similar to Max, where Max next year reportedly needs to be second at least in the Drivers' Championship, basically been given a title fighting car, and therefore, if he's not winning the title, that's on him, but he will have a title fighting car if he's in second, obviously. George similarly needs to be somewhere like that. Now, I'm not sure whether that's second, third, fourth, whatever, but that is important because it means that, one, if Mercedes have a title fighting car and George is fighting for a title, then he will keep his seat for 2027. So George gets to stay at Mercedes if they have a very, very good car, regardless of whether Max comes in or not. And essentially, I'm assuming it will mean that if he's beating Kimi Antonelli, then Kimi will get benched, put somewhere else, whatever will happen, and Kimi will be replaced by Verstappen. If the car is a title fighting car and George isn't performing and is beaten by Kimi, then he gets replaced by Max. So the performance is on his shoulders, like he said, which is important for George because all George can do then is perform, and it's up to him whether he gets to keep that title fighting seat or not. However, on the other side of this is where, like we said in the last few videos, it could get tricky for Toto Wolff, because essentially, if, say, for example, they don't have a title winning car and the performance clause is that George needs to be in the top 3 in the fight to get automatically renewed, and George is 6th in the fight because they don't provide a good car, then George's contract is not automatically renewed, and therefore it's up to both sides whether they want to continue. And given how George has been treated by Toto this year with the whole Max Verstappen thing, it's unlikely that he's going to want to continue under that guise. And therefore, there is a good chance that George decides not to continue. And that could be a really bad position for Toto to be in, because if it is a situation where George's contract doesn't automatically renew because the car is underperforming, and then it's unlikely that Max is going to want to go there either, because why would he? Why would he leave one struggling team to go to another, even if it's powered by a Mercedes engine? Because in that situation, if he does want to think about a Mercedes-powered car, it's likely going to be McLaren, and given what's going on with McLaren at the minute, it's not a done deal that they will have those two drivers that they have this year continuing for 2027. So you could get a situation where George is looking at, say, Aston Martin, and Max is signing a deal with McLaren. I know it sounds wild at the moment, but stranger things have happened in F1. But there is one unfortunate downside for George Russell to this setup, and it's a similar one that Max will face as well. However, Max, as a 4, potentially 5-time world champion, will be probably centered around this deal, where George could have perhaps got himself in the best situation if he hadn't signed this deal. Sorry, I'm making this confusing. What I mean by this is that we know that Max's contract essentially has a cutoff point for these performance clauses. And we know that that's basically the done thing. And it's usually around the summer break time, the end of June, end of July, depending on what the teams want to set up. And I'm pretty sure from what I've heard that this is the same for George as well, that the performance clause kicks off in either June 30th or July 30th. I haven't got it exact, but in and around that time. Now, why that is a problem for George, I know some of you are wondering, Surely that's a good thing that, nothing can be bought out and Max can't leave until then. Why that's a bad thing for George is that, for example, if we go into next season, we kick off the first couple of races, and it's really obvious that Red Bull and Mercedes have underperformed and that both of those drivers will be looking for new seats. The problem for George is he knows his contract is probably going to not be automatically renewed because he's not going to hit that performance clause. He's probably then going to start looking somewhere else, but so is Max. And both of them won't be able to actually sign off on the dotted line of any new contract until that cutoff point because their performance clause won't give them an out yet. The contracts could still technically automatically renew if those teams were to turn things around and if they were to get there. But either way, they can't sign new contracts until that point. It was the same dilemma that Max was in over this season when he was talking to Toto Wolff. Nothing could be done because the performance clause hadn't run out yet. So the problem for George in that situation is if, for example, he is in the car that can't get him there and neither is Max, and say Aston Martin, for example, have done a really good job, go to Aston Martin and say, look, you're losing Fernando for next year. You've got a car that's likely to be the best car next year, even if it's not right now. Sign me on the dotted line. Sure, maybe you could get Max in July, but it's better to have one in the hand and two in the bush right now, especially if Mercedes does improve and Max wants to go there. I'm willing to take that gamble, basically giving himself options. He won't be able to do that, and therefore a lot of teams will say to themselves, well, we could sign George right now or talking to George right now and start kind of closing off those options, or we could just wait until June and both of them will be available and we'll try and get Max first, and if we don't, we'll get George. You know what I mean? It basically puts him in direct competition with Max if both teams screw up. The plus side for George, obviously, though, is if that team doesn't screw up, he keeps his seat. So I can see why he signed it, but those are the downsides. There are definitely big downsides for Toto as well. Thanks for watching. Don't forget to subscribe. Real quick interruption. I have revived my old channel, The Car Nerd. And the reason I've done this is because I wanted to do more automotive content, realized people of this channel don't really love automotive content, but a few hundred of you watching did. And if you do, please go subscribe to my Car Nerd channel. I'm trying to get it to 1,000 subscribers so I can get it monetized. So if you have a moment, click subscribe, and thank you so much for everything.